So let's get into our first topic of the day, which is bride trafficking in India. We are joined by Dr. Vijay Raghavan, who is going to be talking about this topic and how it's an emerging form of exploitation and threat to human dignity. Dr. Vijay Raghavan is a senior research scholar member of GAHTS and works with the Center for Criminology and Justice at the School of Social Work at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in India. So thank you for joining us today, Dr. Raghavan. I will give it over to you to start your presentation.
Thank you, Anna. And it's great to be here and with so many participants from all over the world. So I'm a tad nervous too, but I hope I do a good job. I'm going to share screen. I hope I have permission to share screen, Anna.
Yeah. Yep, you should be all good there.
Sorry, did I press the wrong one? Share. Yeah. It's happening. Just a minute.
No worries. I see more people joining us too, so thank you and welcome if you just logged on. Getting started on our first presentation of the day. We have Dr. Raghavan joining us from India, and he worked around some family obligations that he had today to be here with us. So I'm very grateful that he is here.
No problem at all. Yeah, it's finally done.
Perfect. Yep, I can see your slides.
And I'll just do full screen. Let me see.
If you go into the slideshow tab at the top. Oh, yep, perfect. Great. All looks good on my end.
Yeah. So thank you. And I suppose I have, say, 30 minutes?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So I'll try to stick to time as well. I don't even know if I'll do full 30 minutes. It might get over earlier too. So just to start off, this is a presentation that is based on a study that we at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences did, and we completed it in 2019. It was probably the first national study of human trafficking in India, covering all the 28 states in the country, and quite a massive study and almost like a nightmare. And I would never want to repeat it again, to do such a large-scale study. Basically, the study is called A Study of Human Trafficking in Vulnerable Districts of India. And the link to the study, in case people are interested, is given at the bottom of the slide. And you can just copy it, or I can send it on the chat at a later stage. This study, essentially, the objectives was to look at the existing and emerging forms of human trafficking in India. And we wanted to look at all kinds of human trafficking possible that we could look at and study. We wanted to look at modus operandi, causes, consequences, economics, causes like social, cultural, political. We wanted to look at the linkages in particular between migration, missing persons, and human trafficking, because there had been an earlier study conducted by Dr. P.M. Nair when he was with the former police officer, and he was with the National Human Rights Commission. And that particular study had also shown this linkage between missing persons and human trafficking and migration. And of course, we wanted to look at what could be done to address these issues. I'd like to talk a little bit about the methodology that we used to do the study. So it was a mixed methodology, which included qualitative and quantitative methods. And what we did was, from all the 28 states, we decided to identify 2 to 5, depending on the size of the state, most vulnerable districts in that particular state. Now, vulnerability was decided on the basis of a vulnerability map that we created, which was based on more than 100 parameters. And it was all from secondary data. And we looked at things like sex ratio, the human development indicators, maternal mortality rates, infant mortality rates, the population of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, which is a special category in India. For those of you who may not know, scheduled castes are the Dalit populations who are the so-called earlier, before the Constitution of India was framed, they were known as the untouchable people. And scheduled tribes are the tribal or the indigenous people of India. So we looked at districts which had a high percentage of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe population. We also looked at factors like closeness to national highways, because it's easier to transport a person if the place where the person is being trafficked is close to the national highway. We looked at also closeness to tourist places, because there is a demand for particularly sex trafficking and child trafficking in tourist destinations, and also pilgrim spots. India is a very religious country, and therefore pilgrim spots are really, really of great importance, where a lot of people come there, in large numbers to, pay obeisance to their gods. What we did was, in each of the districts that we selected, so suppose there was a state where we selected 5 districts. Now, in each of the districts, we identified 4 most vulnerable blocks from that district. Typically, the administrative structure of districts in our country is that, you have the lowest unit is villages, and then a few villages, maybe 25 to 30 villages, becomes a block. And then those blocks then end up becoming district. So a district may have 8 to 10 blocks, and each block would have anything between 20 to maybe 70, 80 villages, depending on the size of the block. So what we decided is we would look at 4 vulnerable blocks in each of those districts. And from each block, we would try to collect data from 3 to 5% of villages from each block. So you can imagine the enormity of the exercise that we had undertaken. And from each village, we decided that we would do a household survey of a minimum of 20 households and a maximum of 50 households from each village. From those households, we decided to talk to any respondent who was available in the house, in the family, and was willing to talk to us. And that particular person also gave us information about other members living in that family. Now, this was done mainly for the source districts, because we thought that we are not going to be able to get data about human trafficking from the source districts. So what we decided was, if we do a kind of a vulnerability exercise from the source districts, it would give us some information about who are the people who are getting trafficked from these source districts. For the destination districts, we interviewed key informants, NGOs, police, social workers, lawyers, judges, etc. And we also did a lot of case studies and focus group discussions. So this is the number of, in terms of the data that we collected. So the total number of districts from where we collected data was 134 districts, and India has about 650 districts. So that's the total number of districts from where we collected data. And the total number of households from where we collected data was 36,507. That was the sample size of the households. These 36,500 odd households included about 2 lakh or 200,000 people, individuals. The case studies, we did about 330 odd case studies. We did about 160 plus focus group discussions, and we did nearly 3,000 key informant interviews. And all this was qualitative data. Now, just to quickly, some of the broad findings in terms of what came out from the household survey, though it's not directly related to the bride trafficking presentation that I'm going to make, but I think it's important to let you know what is the issue, what is the broader picture that we are talking about. So if you're looking at those 36,500 households that we interviewed, these are some of the findings that, for example, 58% of the people who we interviewed, that means the population that we covered, did not have access to government offices. They were very far away, remote places, and government offices are often the place for India for getting access to welfare services and social protection, because the welfare schemes are all implemented through these government offices. Almost 44% did not have access to banks. They didn't have a bank account, which is like very important from a modern nation that one talks about. Now, we also asked people when we interviewed them that in the village that you live, what is the percentage of some of the social problems that exist in that? So obviously we didn't ask them if there is something in their house, but in general, when we asked them, we found that almost 5% of the households reported that there was female infanticide taking place, the female feticide taking place in that village. About 29% reported domestic violence, and almost 9% talked about forced marriages. In terms of the vulnerabilities, again, from the houses that we covered, the 36,000 households, almost 40% or more than 40%, 42% nearly, were below the poverty line of the Government of India's level of what is called as the poverty line. There is a committee called the Rangarajan Committee, and that had worked out that if in a rural area, a family earns less than 32 rupees per day, and in an urban area, it's less than 47 rupees per day, then that family can be termed as poor. So almost 41%, 41.6% households were considered poor under this category. Many of them were not aware of government schemes. For example, there is a national scheme for banking inclusion, and it claims 100% coverage. But from those vulnerable houses that we covered, we found that nearly 60% of those families did not know that such a scheme existed. Now, in terms of the individual, vulnerabilities, again, from our sample population, which covered 2 lakh, more than 2 lakh people, 200,000 people, 48% were women, the rest were men. Scheduled castes or Dalits were 23.6%. Scheduled tribes or tribals or indigenous populations were 33%. Now, these are very high numbers if you look at the general population. In India, the general population, the tribal population is about, I think, 9%, and the scheduled tribe population, scheduled caste population is about 13 or 12%. So this is highly overrepresented when you are looking at these populations. And the other backward classes was 23.9%. Children in the age group of 6 to 14 who never went to school was 8.6%. Also, when we looked at reasons why children didn't go to school, it was found that they were not, because they were required to work. That's the reason why they were not sent to school, because the family wanted them to work. And the other one, in the case of girls, there were not adequate facilities for girls in the schools. For example, the presence of a female toilet, etc. In terms of child marriages, from the population of children that we identified, there was 39 point, almost 40%, there was existence of child marriage. This is a slide which tells us in a nutshell what is the kind of vulnerabilities that we are talking about. So here, if you look at, there are household vulnerabilities, there are community-based vulnerabilities, there are individual vulnerabilities, and there are what we called as other vulnerabilities. Amongst the household vulnerabilities, we are talking about, poverty, the lack of knowledge about government schemes, the kind of dwellings, the houses that they live. Most in India, largely houses can be divided into pakka houses and kacha houses, which means houses which are, like built of brick and mortar and concrete, and there are houses which are like sheds, which is made of, just plastic or, tin, and sheds which can easily blow away if there's a storm or if there is a, heavy tornado or something of that sort. So that is also one of the reasons which we put under household vulnerabilities. And the land holdings, because India is primarily an agricultural country, 65% of the population is is dependent on agriculture. And what kind of land holdings? A large number of them did not have land. And therefore, they were working as farm labor in the house of farms of people who had access to land. When you come to individual vulnerabilities, we found that education status was poor. Then there was gender issues in terms of the women and male population that was skewed. Religion, many of them came from minority religion backgrounds. The issue of caste, where large numbers, as is already shown, came from the lower castes and tribal backgrounds, and also the marital status. We saw that many of the women, were coming from female-headed households. In terms of community-based vulnerabilities, there were problems with regard to access to basic services, social problems like child marriage, child labor, domestic violence, missing persons, etc. And other vulnerabilities included socio-cultural factors, geographical factors like remoteness of the village from the nearest railway station or from the nearest highway, and lack of infrastructure facilities, and particular areas which were very prone to natural disasters, where floods, for example, annual floods come every year, or droughts, perennial droughts. 2-3 years, there will be continuous droughts. Now, these are the factors which force people to leave the place, what we all know as forced migration. And of course, there are some parts of the country which are known for conflict, either on the basis of identity or on the basis of, ideology, etc. Going to the just further, we found a link between migration, unsafe migration, and trafficking. And here we found, of course, there's a profile of the migrants. We asked each family, is there somebody in your family who has migrated out of the village? And from that data, we tried to find out more details. So we found that more than 75% were male migrants, so female migrants were less. Again, very high percentage of Dalit, tribal, and other backward classes. And there were also presence of child labor, children who had migrated. Now, if you look at the modus operandi of what we called as unsafe migration, we tried to identify what is really unsafe migration. And because migration is a natural process, people migrate. I'm a migrant within my country. So people migrate for education, for employment, for better life. That is different, what we call as aspirational migration. But then there is the issue of unsafe or forced migration. And how do you identify unsafe or forced migration? And this is how we identified on the basis of the data that we received. One is migrants who gave or took money to migrate. So there was an agent who helped them to go out of the village, for which they paid money to that person, or the person took money from them. That is one indicator of unsafe migration. The second one could be that the average amount that they paid for migration came to about 28,500 rupees, which in dollar terms would come to about $250, $280 or so, which was a very high amount given the family income of that village. It was almost double the family monthly income of those families. Then there were migrants who received no payment for the work they did. So that's a kind of forced migration that one is looking at, where there are elements of trafficking. And there were many migrants who said, people said that he has migrated, but he's not getting good money for the work that he does. So these were the indicators of unsafe migration. Now I'd like to come to the main topic for which I have been asked to talk, which is about bride trafficking. Now, as we all know, I've just put down a working definition of bride trafficking, which is based on our data. A form of trafficking where women and girls are the victims and they are bought and sold against their will or lured for the purpose of marriage. Such trafficking relies on socially sanctioned institution of marriage. This is the most important part that I want to talk about when we talk about bride trafficking, that, there is social sanction for the institution of marriage, which is why it's very difficult to take action against people who have entered into such relationships, because it has social sanction. And therefore, there's nothing illegal about it. If you marry off a person, a family marries off their daughter to a man who may be 25, 30 years older to her and maybe exploiting, it's all within the household. And unless the woman complains or some NGO complains or the police gets to know and they carry out a raid, that issue is going to remain a hidden problem. So this is the biggest issue that we of course are confronting when we are talking about bride trafficking. Of course, it involves women and girls. And the important point to make here is that they get married off to places which are very distant from where they came from. So, like, for example, most of the districts from where bride trafficking is taking place are in the eastern parts of India, the states of Bihar, West Bengal, Odisha, etc., Northeast. And the destination districts are all in the northern part of India, northwest part of India. So there's a huge distance of thousands of kilometers. Therefore, it becomes difficult for those people to even come back if they want to come back. And sometimes these victims are abducted and coerced into forced marriages. Now, I'd like to talk about the profile of the victims from the data that we collected and analyzed. Most of the women we found, women and girls, were in the age group of 12 to 35. There was a higher demand for tribal girls and women from underprivileged families against the preponderance of Dalits, tribals, and other backward classes was very high. A lot of women were from the tea garden areas. There are certain parts of India, particularly in the northeast and in West Bengal and some parts of Assam, which are known for tea gardens, where tribal people work there as labor in the tea gardens. And the condition of these labor is very poor and wages are not great. And that becomes a reason why many of these tribal girls get trafficked, for bride trafficking. Also, these women are very hardworking women, and therefore, when they end up in these kind of marriages, they are also used as slave labor. Another place from where you find a lot of women getting trafficked for marriages are conflict-prone areas and disaster-prone areas. Widows and girls and women from female-headed households are particularly vulnerable to get trafficked for marriages. Then, of course, differently abled, whether physically or mentally challenged, victims of caste-based or gender-based violence. All these people are people who the family really wants to pass them off as early as possible. If you've been a victim of rape, then there is in that village people that there is social shame and stigma attached to it. So the family wants to get you married off and sent off as early as possible. So if you have been a victim of these things, then definitely there is a chance that you might get trafficked for under forced marriages. Destination areas, very important to note, and this is known quite well amongst everywhere where bride trafficking takes place, are those places where the sex ratio is skewed. So there is a demand for girls. The male-female ratio is skewed, and that's the reason why this kind of trafficking is taking place. I've given a list of states from where the source areas and the destination areas, but I don't want to go into the details because, if you want, you can look at the study. It's available online. Some of the characteristics that we talk about when we are looking at bride trafficking is that, as I said, it's become like a business in the northwest part of India. And of course, it's the skewed sex ratio, which makes it difficult for men to find girls suitable match by the families. And most of these are cases of arranged marriages. I don't know how many of you are aware in India, that's the major form of getting married. Most people don't find their own partners. Families arrange marriages. So in India, marriages are between families, not so much between individuals. And of course, individual marriages based on love is something that it's more of an urban phenomenon, not so much as a rural phenomenon. For many families, getting them married, daughter married to a far-off place is under the impression that they are going to get married into a better-off family, because these families are really poor and they feel that it's okay even if they are going far away, but at least they're going to a better family, there's better income, there's better facilities in that family. Many people who get trafficked for bride trafficking are also families which are unable to pay dowry, which is an Indian practice of, bride price, where, the woman has to pay money to the man's family for getting married. It's a practice which is old practice, which is slowly going away, but there's still a long way to go. So a lot of families who are not able to pay dowry within their, and also marriages are supposed to be within the own caste, endogamous. And therefore, if you're not able to find the right suitable match within your own caste, then somebody comes along and offers that, I'll be able to help your daughter to get married in a far off place, but the man is good, and the family jumps at it. And also these people are also offering money, so the wedding expenses are also taken care of by the agents. Our household survey revealed that between 2014 and 16, out of the 36,500 households, there were 4,463 households where a girl was married, and out of that, 24% households reported that they had paid money to somebody to get married. This shows that it's possible. I mean, we can't make a confirmed statement, but it's possible that 24% of these girls were actually trafficked for marriage purposes. The average family income of such households from where this kind of trafficking takes place was a very small amount. Monthly income, family income of 15,000 rupees, which is $150. So it's like really a small amount. And 28% of the girls who got married during this period, 2014 to 16, were less than 18 years of age, and their marriages involved monetary exchange. If the age difference between the man and the girl was high, especially more than 10 years, the monetary exchange was higher. So the family would get more money if the man of the groom was 10 years or more older than the girl with whom they were getting married. Very often, not very often, or in many times, the bride's family would not know the location of the groom's family. So the agent would come and say, this is the marriage, and you're getting money, you don't have to pay dowry, nothing, and the person lives in this state, but the exact details, the location was often not revealed. So when they wanted to find out later how their daughter is, they had no clue. They didn't know where to go. Now, looking at the
I'm just going to
modus
hop
operandi.
in quickly, sorry, and let you know that you've got about 5 minutes, and then we'll take time for questions.
Yes, okay.
Perfect.
When you look at modus operandi, most of the agents lured vulnerable families with attractive marriage offers. Placement agencies, truck drivers, what I've called here as ferrywalas, they were vendors and hawkers, and agents posing as lovers. Sometimes former victims, initially after marriage, very happy situation when they've got into a nice family, and then the exploitation starts after some time. During that period, many of these victims were sent back to the village to recruit new victims. Also, most of these girls were spotted by agents during local festivals and marriage ceremonies. The place of the marriage was very often, in 13% of the cases, the marriage took place outside the village. So people won't know what happened. And very often, in about 19% of the cases, the marriages was just a sham marriage. What is put here as chunni orna is just a kind of a veil that is put over the woman, and that's considered as marriage, but not a proper legal marriage ceremony that is conducted. Most of the grooms were older, widowers, divorcees, and with children to look after, persons with disability, or somebody with substance abuse. These are the forms of exploitation that took place after marriage, reported by some of those families. Forced labor, domestic servitude, sex slaves, bearing and caring of children, taking care of elderly and livestock, physical abuse, no decision-making power, fraternal polyandry, that means all the brothers in that family would have sex with that woman, and resale of brides. Sometimes they would be sold off after having lived with that family for some time. Impact on the victims: loss of social network, isolation, alienation, shame and stigma, confiscation of their documents so they can't go back, forced to hide their identity, leading to identity conflict and psychological trauma. And of course, barriers. The main barrier to escape the situation that they were in is the social sanction given to marriage as an institution. they couldn't get out of it in most of the cases. Some of the researchers that I looked at is showing that it's a phenomenon that's pretty prevalent in some of the Asian parts of this region that I come from. And there is a study which is looking at the Sino-Myanmarese border, a study which is showing that, again, the skewed sex ratio in China and the fact that the one-child policy has led to a great demand for women amongst the Chinese population. And there are quite a few studies which are showing that China-Pakistan border, there is bride trafficking taking place. There is demi-bride trafficking, an article which is talking about the Southeast Asian region, Korea, Myanmar, all these countries from where women are being taken into China. And there is also another study which is looking at a review of bride trafficking literature. And most of these findings are very similar to what we have found. Final slide. These are some of the recommendations that we made in our study. There is a system in place in India where the police, every district has anti-human trafficking units, which are specialized units within the police department, which is supposed to take care of any reported cases of trafficking and take action, rescue, take action against the traffickers, etc. But the structure is very, on the paper it looks good, but in practice it is not a very strong structure. There's not enough resources being plowed into these structures. So we have recommended that these anti-human trafficking cells need to be strengthened. There is need for greater coordination between Missing Persons Bureau and the anti-human trafficking units in India. There's a need for creating help desks and helplines for migrants, especially women and children. The Child Welfare Committees are established under the Juvenile Justice Act needs to organize awareness workshops, particularly in tribal areas, with the help of the local church or with religious organizations, so that people come to know that this kind of trafficking is going on. There's a need for workshops to be organized with the police on human trafficking. Many of them are not aware that human trafficking is going on. Shelter homes should be expanded. Every district should have at least 1 or 2 shelter homes, so that if a woman is in trouble, she can go to and stay there till the time that she wants to get out. Placement agencies need to be strictly regulated. Currently, that is lacking. And there is a need for setting up a national online interactive knowledge hub and a resource center on human trafficking, which will provide information and support to police, NGOs, activists, lawyers, and government departments. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Vijay. That was very informative. We do have a couple questions already in the chat. One quick question. The study that you talked about, what years was that study conducted?
So the data collection was started around 2014-15, and we ended data collection in 2017. And then we took another 2 years to write the report. So the study is dated 2019.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Data collection was between 2015 and 2017.
Okay. Then we do have a couple questions about statistics on males. So when you did this, I know it was focused primarily on female vulnerabilities and bride trafficking, but did your study look at any statistics on males, or is there information about groom trafficking in India?
If you look at the study, I have only presented one form of human trafficking from the study, which is bride trafficking. The study talks about all other forms of human trafficking. So there are separate chapters. Chapter on labor trafficking, there's a chapter on sex trafficking, there's a chapter on child labor, there's a chapter on surrogacy, there's a chapter on new and emerging forms of trafficking. So there is a lot of data on male trafficking as well, particularly bonded labor and child labor, where there is a lot of data.
Is groom trafficking a thing, or is it?
No, we didn't really come across that.
Okay.
Groom trafficking.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question about the health access and health services for victims.
Well, the problem is that, first of all, there is denial at a larger level that trafficking is taking place. In fact, the study was partly sponsored by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Government of India. And we had a lot of problem to get the report released because they were not unhappy with the findings. They didn't expect to see these kind of findings coming out from the report. So it took us almost a year to convince them that this will only help the government to come up with better policies. So when it comes to access, what exists, of course, is when it comes to children, we are in a better state. Because there are child welfare committees set up, statutory bodies set up under the Juvenile Justice Act in every district. There are shelter homes for children in every district. So if a child is in a vulnerable state, there are possibilities of keeping the child in the institution. There is sponsorship, there is foster care, there's also adoption if possible. So all these options are there. But when it comes to adults, particularly women, the facilities are not as good as it should be. Healthcare, particularly mental health care, is a really area that requires a lot more than what is being done currently.
Thank you. See, we have a couple people with their hands raised. Is it Lilia? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but feel free to come off mute and ask your question. If not, I see Dawn also has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think in part you've answered my question. I was really, thank you for a great, incredible, really quick training on this issue. It's amazing. I am trying to understand areas where you could be preventative. And it seems like you've got, the caste system, you've got the marriage, embedded into both culture and law. So, yeah, very complicated. However, do you have any kind of community support that can help you do some outreach and education into some spaces? We find that that's really helpful sometimes, and I know that you have a greater challenge. Thank you.
So thank you for that question. Actually, the first point that needs to be looked at is acceptance that such a problem exists. But in most of these places where this kind of trafficking is going on, there is denial. There's denial by the state. There is denial by the community. I see one possibility in terms of intervention. India has one of the largest network of women's self-help groups. There are
Yes.
lakhs and lakhs of self-help groups in the country. And if the government took this up as an exercise, particularly in the source states, and it's known, the source states are known by now, and these self-help groups could be trained to create a village level awareness, because a lot of these women who are getting trafficked, their families don't really, they're not doing it deliberately. They don't really know that this is what is going to happen to their daughters. And so if there is proper awareness, both amongst the local police and in terms of the people in those villages, I'm sure the situation can be addressed at least to some extent. But the larger point you've made is, institutions of caste and marriage are the real barriers to address this problem.
I'm aware too of some very powerful women's educational departments and programs in higher education. So, yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you both. We do have two more quick questions before we do have to move on. Arena in the chat asked if you think anything has changed in the last 10 years since you collected this research.
I really don't know. I really looked for studies, and the last one I could get was 2021, and that too was not like a post and like a sweeping one. It was a more like a review of literature that was there. So I'm not really sure whether the situation has changed or not. The situation will only change when there is greater acceptance amongst everybody that bride trafficking is going on. But if it's a convenient option for states where there is a skewed sex ratio, the problem is not going to stop because poverty is there, vulnerability is there, exploitation continues. So only if the sex ratio improves in those destination states, I think that only then will this problem be addressed to some extent.
Thank you. And then last question, Shahid asked, what's the role of religion being used as a tool for trafficking, especially girl-child marriages in Muslim communities? Because there are certain customs and religious beliefs which enhance such type of trafficking. Take it for the example of Pakistan and Bangladesh. Anything to
Yes.
add to
So
that?
there's something similar in a certain region of Western UP, which is known as Mewat region, MEWAT, where there's a landowning Muslim community similar to the Hindu landowning community in those areas. The Hindus are known as GAHTS, and the Muslims are known as Mios there. And these are the people where there are existing social practices of exogamy, which is leading clan exogamy, which actually promotes this kind of trafficking. So there are certain social cultural practices which could promote these kind of practices in certain communities. Yes, I agree.
Thank you, Vijay, and thank you for your question.